Good afternoon. Today is September 7th, 2023. This is our ISD 709 Policy Committee meeting at the District Services Center. We're going to get started. We have one reading, one policy for our first reading, the student medication policy. And this is policy 516. The purpose of the policy is to set forth the provisions that must be followed when administering non-emergency prescription medication to students at school. And then I'll just read the general statement of policy, and maybe then we can come to you, Assistant Superintendent Barnes, and maybe you can speak a little bit to the policy. Great. The school district acknowledges that some students may require prescribed drugs or medication during the school day. Any reference to prescription or prescribed medication or drugs in this policy includes over-the-counter medication, with the exception of non-prescription pain medication possession for secondary students, and then it says see section K number 7 for requirement. The school district's licensed school nurse, trained health assistant, principal, or teacher will administer prescribed medications except any form of medical cannabis in accordance with law and school district requirements. So I see quite a few little changes and additions, so we'll look forward to hearing from you about those.
Thank you, and I'll call up Director Crane to the table so he can speak to this policy.
Does anybody have a paper copy? Or?
Yes.
I can try and get my board book up, but it's running a little slow right now. Thanks. All right, I'm going to push, or is it already on?
You should just push it while it's on green.
Green, there we go. Members of the board, thanks for having me tonight. This medication policy actually came before the board in April, and at that time, we had many sections removed, including EpiPen usage in the schools, and we put them back in at the request of the board and superintendents that wanted to see some additional things added in back with this student medication policy. This is a standard Minnesota School Board Association policy, and the red strikeouts are just recommendations by our school team, Crystal Oker, and the health staff, language that we use in our district rather than using the Minnesota School Board language. Does that make sense? Do you have specific questions about any strike-through sections in general?
I had one question. So if we look at section 3, letter F, wait a minute. I think I'm looking at the wrong part here.
Letter F does have a strike-through.
It does have a strike-through. I guess I had one question, like, is there a form for that? For any medical authorization, would that be the form for the authorization to administer medication? Would that be the form that you're referring to?
Yeah, we have several forms. Our health department actually probably has the largest number of forms used across the district. I don't know the name of that form right now. I could look into what the form is called. They all have titles, and I don't recall what the title of that form is right now.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just had a question about section 3H, where it says the school nurse or other designated person. I guess from my experience, I always thought it was the school nurse that administered prescription drugs that were properly authorized to be administered during the day. Do we have teachers and/or special education teachers that are administering medication for?
It's rare that we would designate anybody else because Duluth Schools is very fortunate to be able to hire our own nursing team. More rural districts do struggle with locating and securing the nursing staff that they need. And for example, they might have a med administered by a clerical staff member. As I said, it's extremely rare. We do have for example, health assistants in all of our public school sites, and they do take a lunch break as well. But we don't necessarily train the lead clerical people to administer the meds. We just set a schedule that the students know when, for example, the health assistant went to lunch, and that's typically only 30 minutes. So across ISD 709, we rarely ever train others to administer meds. One of the situations where we might, in a field trip situation, we might need to have assistance. And oftentimes it's parents that come and help us with field trip situations, and we don't even need staff to administer med. We're very fortunate to have a well-supported parent group in Duluth schools for students, including medical fragile students. Wolf Ridge is an example where we want to make sure the students are cared for when they attend Wolf Ridge. And yes, we have sent nurses to Wolf Ridge.
So if the nurse at a middle school, let's say, is out sick or absent that day, does her assistant or is there somebody else that then can step in and?
So let me give you a couple examples of coverage for that. All of our schools have an LSN, but most LSNs have 2 or 3 site locations that they help monitor as well. The public school sites all have an LPN that manages the day-to-day operations, and if the LPN is sick, first callback for coverage would be to the LSN to report to their school. And they typically, for example, Ordine East, the majority of our LSN's work, probably 3 to 4 days a week, is at Ordine because it's a larger population than Lester Park, her second school of designation. So she would report to Ordine if, for example, the health assistant is absent. We do have 2 float nurses, which are like teachers on call that we hire. They're Duluth Public Schools employee, and we assign their work and their responsibilities dependent upon where the absences are across the district. So we also have 2 float nurses.
Okay. I guess there was something else in here too that was new to me in some respects, and that was secondary students being allowed to self-administer over-the-counter medication is, and that's acceptable with the state statute on this or the state.
Do you remember what section that's under?
I remember reading that.
Yeah, I saw. Well, it's F, I believe. There's no parent over 18 years old or older. What's that?
Non-prescription medication, which is, looks like, let me show you to it properly. Looks like it appears in K7, I believe. If that's, I'm wondering if that's a section you're referring to, which is page 4 of 6.
Yeah, there it is, non-prescription medication.
Right.
Yeah.
You said
And again, this,
on page 4, Anthony?
yes,
Yeah,
it's page 4 of 6,
Number 7.
number 7. At the very top. Or if you're looking for it by section, it would be section K, number 7. And it's titled non-prescription medication. And again, as Jason stated earlier, this is the model policy that exists.
Right.
In many districts have adopted it. This allows us to have that flexibility to, back to your other question, give us the flexibility if needed to have others administer medications. This also allows us to allow students, which is allowed by state statutes and supported in the statute, to take non-prescription medications themselves.
So middle school students would be allowed to carry Tylenol and or Advil and or other over-the-counter medications and self-administer.
Yes.
It's clearly identified to the health staff that is in their possession in the school, so they have to get permission to do it.
Yes.
Correct. And as you see here, and by parents. Parents have to indicate that in writing.
Okay, yeah, the parent guardian must submit written authorization. Correct. Thank you.
While we're on page 4, just at the very top, right above number 7, where we were just looking, it says note, the provisions of paragraph 6 are optional and the school board may choose to include or exclude those provisions. I was just wondering what paragraph 6 was, because I kept looking, there's number 6, the medications. I just couldn't figure out what was paragraph 6, unless we did the policy.
It's probably referring to number 6, like you just said.
Okay. Okay.
Is there any reason why we lost the lights, Ben? We're just not moving.
Nobody moved.
Okay.
Great. Well, are there any other questions or comments on this policy? This is just a first reading, so we will have a second reading next month as well. So if anyone thinks of any other questions or comments, we can reach out to Assistant Superintendent Rollins or Patty and kind of address those and address them at the next meeting.
I'd be happy to try to get Crystal to attend that meeting too.
Perfect.
It'd be nice to hear from her.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Crane, for being here and for that feedback. So then we have a reading, a policy for a second reading, which is 904, the distribution of materials on school district property by non-school persons. And I remember we did a first and a second reading and then passed a similar policy last month, which is the policy that relates to students and employees. But I'll read the purpose. This is policy 904. The purpose of this policy is to provide for distribution of materials appropriate to the school setting by non-staff and non-students on school district property in a reasonable time, place, and manner which does not disrupt the educational program nor interfere with the educational objectives of the school district. So like flyers, if people wanted to bring a flyer to the school, they would need to go through and follow this policy to be able to do that. So that would be one example. Do you have anything else to add on this?
No, that's correct, and as you see, and Patty can help me because I don't see either, this is, I don't see any red lines. Again, this is second read. I don't recall any questions during their first read, so just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Member Sano.
Yeah, thank you. I guess on procedures, with item 6A, I just had a thought. I mean, I'm thinking that where we have this at least 5 days in advance, and I'm sure that there's got to be situations where, even with administration approval, that things have probably been distributed with less than 5 days of, so I mean, do we need to have 5 days in there, or can we be flexible with that? It just seems like
maybe saying something like copies of materials to administration at least 5 days in advance or at the discretion of the administration. So that way, when it's sensitive, it gives people time to look at it and consider it. But if it's something that's, really, say something comes up for a Monday and somebody brings something in on a Friday and says, we really need to get this to kids, and it's super beneficial and really supportive, consider that.
Well, I mean, you just take something as benign as hockey registration or basketball registration for the youth basketball league, let's say, and it comes into the school on a Thursday, and there's 1 week left to, so these things usually get vetted, yes, by administration, and then they make that decision to handle them at the end of the day. But it seems like I've got to believe there's situations where things are being distributed and it hasn't gone through a 5-day period before it's, released by administration to then.
Agreed. I would support that change if the board is agreeable to it as well, because I think it does allow that flexibility, and we want to make sure that we are, like everything else, trying to implement policies as consistently as possible and not making one group or one student organization have to wait more days than another. So I think adding the language does give the administration the opportunity to expedite the approval of some materials.
So I would actually recommend that we add a sentence, rather than add what I said where we did. It might be clearer to have a sentence at the end after the 4 points that says something to the effect of materials shared with fewer than 5 days or without the above information will only be distributed at the discretion of the administration. Something like that.
I thought the way you said it the first time was fine too, but just figure out a way to rephrase that or add a catch-all that does give administration some flexibility where, it's not getting hung up on technicality in this policy.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this policy? I know last time I pointed out, all of our policies have legal references to, where the MSBA has kind of done their research, and so there's definitely a lengthy legal references to this one, and it was cross-referenced by a couple other model policies from MSBA, so great. Thank you. I liked both of those changes, so either one.
And I think it's timely too, given that we're going into elections and things like that, to have this policy in place as well. Just considering people with different things that they might be wanting to bring forward.
Absolutely. So then if we move on, we have several policies for review, which means these policies don't have to have a first and second reading because we're making smaller changes to them that are just, maybe smaller word changes. This first policy that we were looking at, I had to inquire about because there was actually quite a bit of added language and a little bit more deleted language than I was expecting for just a policy for review. And so thank you to Patty for kind of sharing with me why. The reason why that we can pass it in a policy for review is that these are legislative parameters. This is legal language that we have to have in there. And so I'm just kind of read this one little paragraph that kind of explains it. Because some revisions are effective immediately or this summer, and because the revisions are largely taken word for word from 2023 legislation, school boards may choose to adopt changes in a single meeting. This is a local decision for school boards. So I just wanted to kind of explain, that was helpful for me to know, because I was kind of wondering at first, well, why is this one not a first reading? But that makes sense because this language legally has to be in there word for word from the legislature. So thank you for sharing that. So this first policy that we're going to look at for review is 418, drug-free workplace, drug-free school. I do feel like we reviewed this policy earlier this year,
We did.
but because of these legislative changes, have to review it one more time here. The purpose of the policy is to maintain a safe and healthful environment for employees and students by prohibiting the use of alcohol, toxic substances, medical cannabis, intoxicating cannabinoids, edible cannabinoid products, and controlled substances without a physician's prescription. So that's the purpose of the policy. Thank you, Patty, for all of your work on making sure that we're up to date with all our legislative changes with our policies. Let's see here. Does anyone else have anything to add to this one? I have a few comments, but I want to open it up to comment.
Just that this was pretty recent legislation, of course, related to the legalization of marijuana. Because of the safety aspects, so we need to make sure that we have policy in place, and of course, make sure that people aren't under the influence at all. And also considering school or student usage.
I did have one question, and we don't need to answer it right now, but I was just wondering, like in section 6 for school programs, it says starting in the 2026-27 school year, the school district must implement a comprehensive education program on cannabis use and substance use, including but not limited to the use of fentanyl or mixtures containing fentanyl, and it goes kind of on. So I'll be interested in, I guess, updates maybe in a year, maybe at our committee of the whole, what that might look like. And just maybe interested to see what that would look like compared to what we're doing now. So.
Can I add to that? Because I had the same question or concern. So are we expecting something to come down from the state in terms of curriculum or are we going to have to develop our own? How do you see this?
I'm hoping the former. I'm hoping they will develop things for us to actually implement in terms of curriculum and expectations. So I appreciate the timeline because we want to make sure that we follow what the state will provide in terms of guidance. So I believe the state will hopefully provide some information and resources for us to use as we implement what is expected here.
Maybe Director Craig can help me out here too. I do think there's probably some of these topics covered in our health classes, correct? So I think again, there's for certain grade levels, middle school, maybe high school, where they have a health class also. You know, there's probably students getting some exposure and opportunity for some of this information to get out there. But I guess we'll see.
We will see.
We'll continue to work closely with our partners, with organizations like the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, just because some other school districts might be further ahead with some of the curriculum and or some state regulations, but we can also work very closely with the Minnesota Department of Education on that as well.
Perfect, thank you. So the next policy for review is policy 419, tobacco-free environment. The purpose of this policy is to maintain a learning and working environment that is tobacco-free. And as we flip through this policy, really, well, I guess there was one more, couple changes. Just one small little change on section 4. A, where it added an American Indian student must carry medicine pouch containing loose tobacco intended as observance of traditional, spiritual, or cultural practices. And I was just really glad to see this added. I think respecting the cultural practices of all of our students and teachers and community members is important. So it was just kind of a little addition onto that section, which is exceptions.
On that topic, didn't we add a policy on smudging recently?
Yes, we did.
And shouldn't there be maybe some direct connection to that policy in this
Let's look
exception?
at the back here. So yeah, if we look at the cross references, it's not cross-referenced in this policy. Or are those strictly MSBA cross-references?
Those ones are MSBA. If we want to add it, we can. It's a regulation that we have about the smudging. So if you'd like me to include the regulation under the cross-references, I'd be happy to add it.
I would think, since we are making note of it here in exceptions, you know, that should probably be part of this policy.
But it looks like an appropriate cross-referencing that needs to happen. And again, this is also one of the changes that has come through recent legislative changes.
Thank you.
And I believe we read that smudging, it's not a policy, it's a regulation. We read that in conjunction with this policy too at this time. So again, another example of this policy for review. So if there's no more questions or comments, we'll move on to the next one. We have a lot of policies this time. So the next one is 513, student promotion, retention, and program design. The purpose of the policy is to provide guidance to professional staff, parents, and students regarding student promotion, retention, and program design. And again, I'm assuming these are legislative changes?
Correct.
Correct.
It's just basically a reference to a statute change, so something the statute changed, we need to make sure that the appropriate statute was cited and that the language was updated, but it's very minor language change.
And I believe we have a regulation for this as well.
Okay.
So I think, and it's saying that we have to have a program, and we do have a program, and we have a way to have the students. So we are following what they have.
Any questions, Member Sandholm?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one, which is 509, I believe. Yep, 509, enrollment of non-resident students. So the purpose of this policy is the school district desires to participate in the enrollment options program, open enrollment, established by Minnesota statute section 124D.03. The purpose of this policy is to set forth the application and exclusion procedures used by the school district to make said determination. And again, legislative changes and updates in here. And I see in the legal references, there's one highlighted. Is there a reason why that one's in red?
It's in the new law, so yeah, so they added it.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm coming to kind of facilitate Rosie being gone today, so just a lot of traffic and just backups on the freeway and babysitting responsibilities, but thanks for doing the policy.
Thanks for joining us, Chair. We're on policy 509, which has a few legislative changes. So the only comment I had is in section 4, number 4. I guess that would be it. I just thought it was a little oddly worded. But that may have just been me. So the red part where it says, or is readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, that such term does not include a pocket knife, and so on. It just seems a little hard to read when I was reading that, but it's a minor thing.
And that's the wording that MSBA provided.
Okay, I liked our wording better.
Yeah.
So, but if that's,
General recommendation these days is to use the MSBA guidance, but I did like our wording as well. And that's a recommendation from legal counsel in general as well, to stick to MSBA policies, and as with many things, whether it's high school league or other entities, we try to stick to them.
sounds good. I don't have any other comments or questions on this. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
I just have a question, and maybe we don't have an answer, but I'm just curious how many open enrollment students we might have in the district to start the school year. Do we have any idea? I'm not talking about Denfeld to east, or, east to Denfeld, or, school within the district, outside the district, open enrollment.
We do have that information. I don't have that information that's ready, but I will have it at the board meeting.
And then I just have a follow-up question for you then, Emerson. It's just that if you look at general statement of policy, Roman numeral 2, I just wondered, the general statement of policy, that's acceptance and rejection of open enrollment applications that the school board has, and it says that we adopted that in 6/20/23, and I just thought maybe if we would is there an addendum to this that we place that on, or can you clarify that? It is, and if not, we can clarify it at school board meeting too. It's just that Roman numeral 2, the general statement of policy, the school board adopts specific standards for acceptance and rejection of open enrollment applications. So is that just what's all of this that's down below? This is what we follow in acceptance or rejection. Is that what that
That's
statement
right.
means? Okay.
Yep, that's what that
I
means.
just thought there was some form or something that we should have been looking at.
Thank you, and since we're on this topic, I'll share a little insight on why this is really important and what has changed over the last couple of years, especially this year related to open enrollment. As a district, we've always had the opportunities to set caps at schools upon some of the items that they list as reasons why we can set caps at schools, or say a school is closed because of overcapacity, a grade level has too many students in it, and because of other, there's a couple other factors that a district could use in order to say a school or a class level is closed for open enrollment. As a practice over the years, we used to allow many families who want open enrollment to pretty much choose the school they want to attend. This year that has changed because we want to make sure that we are mindful of class sizes and capacity. So families who, for example, if they wanted to attend East or Ordean East, two sites that are, in our mind, over capacity, have significant enrollments, those two schools are closed to open enrollment students. However, we approve applications for open enrollment, but they now get a designation of Denville High School. So their application is approved, but their assigned school is Denville or Lincoln Park. Just want to let you know that, and it's, the statute says that at the, every year, we, and with the board adoption, can come express capacity concerns or other concerns and designate which schools are closed or which grade levels are closed. And that's what we've done.
And I thank you for clarification there, serving on the transfer and appeal committee. I recognize the challenges that we even have within our own district with our own students, trying to accommodate student parent needs across our district. One thing when I asked that question too about just open enrollment students, I am curious to know if we are getting, in the elementary grades where, maybe they're participating in our Spanish immersion or the Ojibwe program in South. So yeah, just would like to know if we have that.
And those are great examples, and those happen to be some of our programming that is, Lowell in general is very taxed from, they've gone up 60 additional students this year, probably because of that great demand for those programs. And we've reached a point where we have no more classroom space and we have no more cafeteria space. And so we would love to welcome new students, and we'll have to consider that as a board and as a district, how we work on some of those, programming and boundary issues moving forward.
Great, if there's no more questions or comments, we'll move on to the next policy. Thanks for all that information, Assistant Superintendent Barnes. All right, one more policy, and Mr. Crane, you were right, we are reviewing the overdose policy again. So the last one for review is policy 516.5. The overdose medication policy. So the purpose, as a means of enhancing the health and safety of its students, staff, and visitors, the school district will require, administer, and store doses of an opioid antagonist, specifically naloxone, Narcan, and administration devices or kits for emergency use to assist a student, staff member, or other individual believed or suspected to be experiencing an opioid overdose on school district property during the day. So this one is coming back to us, and I'm assuming again because of more regulations from the legislature.
That is correct.
Yeah. So I see some information on page 2 that was added.
I think the main thing the legislature had added in that was a definition of what a school site was.
Got it.
That was the main change.
And I would say that I'm grateful that this is a change in our policy, but that we were actually forward thinking and we had this policy in place. We were one of the pioneering districts in the area to put forward a emergency medication policy like this. And so we were a little bit ahead of the curve, but that's what's causing us to reframe our policy just a little bit because of the new legislation.
And so can you just update us, do we have now the ability, are we set up now, is this a current practice where we have the opioid, the Narcan on our site now? And do we have the nurses present as well? Director Crane.
So a few updates. We, on Tuesday, was that August 29th or the 30th? Whatever Tuesday was, we did a comprehensive training. We had essentially health nursing staff, and we hired 2 other agency staff from St. Louis County to come provide the training. We had over 34 participants. We will have, it's not in our district yet. We had an order that was submitted 3 weeks ago. It hasn't arrived to the district yet. It will be stored in our AED area
Okay.
in the public sector within the school, so anyone can access that, and also a two doses in the health office as well. This is mandatory, as the policy states, in all of our schools where we have students. We're also going to put here at the district service center, because we do have students that come, school board meetings and those things. We'll have a administration of 2 doses here as well. So many of our staff have been trained in the initial training round, but we also have access to an online training for additional members to be trained. All of our nursing staff was there at those. Several administrators were at that training in the initial day. I attended. It was very well done. I feel much more relief after going through the training to know how, I don't want to say easy, but manageable. If you need to respond to a person in distress, you can after receiving the training. It puts your mind to ease. What else? What were some of the other questions? Member Lowfall.
I think you answered them. I wondered about whether the medication was on site yet, whether our nurses are, and I know that we have nurses in every building, so at least that's, I mean, didn't the law require that we have one person designated in all of our
At
buildings?
least one, and we offered more than one. So we sent the message out to administrators to choose your team. In the evenings, assistant principals manage the athletic programs that are at the sites. Engineering staff has been invited to attend the training. So just we're thinking broadly about creating awareness and training our staff. Anyone is welcome to be trained.
And you're saying the training now is online as well?
We have an online option, yes. The initial training took about an hour to do, and the hour included 15 minutes of questions, and it was, as I said, I enjoyed it, so.
Can our district staff earn professional development?
They do for that day.
Licensure hours towards their license
Yeah,
renewal?
certified staff do on that
Okay.
Tuesday they did. And then I think with our online training, you can take a short little quiz, and that gives you a certificate that could also count for credit for relicensure. I'm almost positive on that, but let me check on that to make sure.
I'd love to encourage any board members as well, as I think about the, that we're here, 2 to 3 to 4 times a month in the evening. Maybe that I don't know how we'd have a trained person necessarily.
So I have to lift up Crystal Oker, has been a huge person behind the scenes, lifting this project up. Matt Johnson was in consultation before he left as well, so just our safety committee type people were involved in this process, and a lot of people did a tremendous amount of work over the summer.
And I agree with you, Chair Lowful. One of the things that's important, I believe, is this is probably just as important and timely as even making sure staff are trained in the use of an AED, right? Because we know that there are a number of incidents that have occurred in the community, and we know that making sure that we have available staff who are present and who can respond in a timely fashion is important. So as many staff who are willing to be trained, we want them trained, because we want people to be able to respond to someone in distress.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm really just glad to hear that the Narcan medication is going to be located in the AED. I remember when we did our first reading for this policy many months ago. I think initially we were thinking maybe just in an office, and I think it is, to your point of training on the AED, it's a life-saving measure, and we need to make sure that when a life needs to be saved, it can be accessed. So thanks for all your work on it.
Thank you, we appreciate that, and I support those comments as well. I think it's a huge issue throughout the nation, and it affects all walks of life, and making sure that we're prepared here is important. I can also assure the board that we will be taking a look at where we are from a district services center as a unit, and looking to make sure who's trained here. So very likely I would be surprised if in the near future one of us was trained as well. So it might not necessarily be a board necessity to be trained, but let's make sure that we have somebody that's trained for these after hour events.
Perfect, thank you. And then we have one more thing on our agenda, number 5, regulation. So this is just informational. It's the deletion of 6180R, procedures of administration of medication during the school day. I'm assuming this was wrapped into our other policy.
Correct, I confirmed with Crystal on that, and she said the regulation is no longer needed because it addresses those in the new policy we're adopting. You're absolutely right.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions on that?
Just a recap too, is this, is the only one are all of them first readings except for our last one, 516?
We
Or are these
just
all second
had
readings?
one first reading and one second reading, and then we had a lot for review, which means there were
Okay,
very
yeah,
small
yeah.
changes or just legislative requirements that we put in there.
Okay. And so again, to just, we have an opportunity as board members to look these policies over, and when we present at September's board meeting to, either have a further question or just more opportunity, but our community can watch this tomorrow on our YouTube, and that will give that necessary information to our community as well.
Yeah, so everything would be on the consent agenda except for the first reading. Student medication.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's correct.
I think that's the last thing I would say. Member Locker Kemp, I know she would say thank you, Patty, for all of your efforts and the team for all the work behind getting these policies ready and making all the changes and taking care of things. So I want to say thank you for her and thank the team who helped assist with getting these policies updated.
I second that for sure. Thank you.
And I would agree with that, and I would also say that the board has worked on its 3-year board action plan, and part of the action plan was to cover at least 25% of the policies each year, with either revising and reviewing as needed, or just taking a look at it and make sure that there wasn't a need for updating. And this past year, we were ahead of schedule, so thanks to the board for all that hard work.
Perfect. Then our policy meetings come to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.